All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are in for a real treat. The summer is starting a little early. Forget about the Memorial Day backyard parties. Forget about the summer blockbusters. We've got arguably maybe our biggest blockbuster in Sportswire radio history. This man, they don't call him destructive for nothing. He has wrestled in 18 companies, 7 different states. In the words of Johnny Cash, he is literally the everywhere man. Most notably, he is in right now one of our favorite companies, an up and coming company called ROEW. You saw him in the main event there this past week in Weekend Warfare, where he wrestled the, for now, current champion Jason Storm. And you saw him on ROEW TV this past evening, and he spoke and he said a few different things. And the champion Jason Storm showed up, but he might have planned his early funeral. This man has been a world champion in a number of different companies. He has done it all, but now he comes to Sportswire Radio. As every other guest we have on here, he may need no further introduction, but he's going to get one anyway. So with that, wait for it. Further ado here on the Sports Report. Number one, the sports show, the one and only, legendary, destructive,
What do I even say after that intro? That was phenomenal. I was not prepared for that at all.
You're Jack Delta. Listen, I heard you on a podcast a couple of months back, and you said, wow, that was a good one. And I'm like, you know what? They know me for one reason only throughout my 4.5 years on Sportswire Radio. It's not the famous interviews we've had, not the who's who of people. No, it's those introductions. You are a man that has wrestled in 18 different companies, 7 different states. So I put all of my might into that one. I was already on today in another country. So that tells you the effort that we put into that introduction, my friend.
Dude, I can't wait to I can't wait to get in all of this because no offense to the other interview that I was on, but I feel like just from the little bit that I've spoke with you, you actually like are well versed in all the things that I've done, and we have a lot to get through.
We got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of people that want to say hello, but I want to talk about something current with you, Mr. Delta. That is our friend over at ROEW, and obviously you were a part of the main event here this past weekend, Weekend Warfare. You took on the champion, Jason Storm. Obviously, the good guy, CJ Black, talked about what went down after the show, and certainly we saw yesterday you and Mr. Black were certainly together, and it looked like you were about to be the new ROEW champion. And for whatever reason, Jason Storm decided to make a cameo. Maybe it's an early date for his funeral, but for those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio, Jack Delta, you have to talk about what is going on here between yourself, the good guy CJ Black, and for now, the current champion, who Mr. Black won't name, but we'll say it for now, and that's Jason Storm.
All right, so let's get this straight out of the way, because I know this is like the most hot button topic we got going on. But, so a few months back, I took a break from ROEW. I had some personal stuff going on, and when I started putting my feelers back out that I was ready to go again, I got a personal message from CJ Black about coming back to ROEW, and he had this thing planned for me. And in that time frame that I had left, Jason Storm somehow managed to weasel his way into becoming the world. So we have made an alliance. Me and CJ Black. We have different motives, you know. We have different things going on here. Because me personally, I just want to hurt Jason. I don't like Jason.
I got that feeling. Listen, we watched the show. We spoke about it with CJ, and I got that sense that you're not necessarily a fan of Mr. Storm.
I'm not. I don't appreciate what he stands for. He comes out, he's loud, he's super abrasive, hurts my head. And CJ Black, however, you know, he's calm. He's got this like aura to him, and what we tried to do, like the message that I wanted to send at Weekend Warfare was to put him away and then win the championship because he wouldn't be able to be there. But somehow, against his own power and against management's decisions, he decided to stumble out there and be loud and hurt CJ Black again. So in the future, Mr. Storm, we're going to have an issue. But as of right now, I'm talking with Reverend Tom Bryce.
I got all that here, but I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to talk about Mr. Storm for a second. And you've been in a lot of different companies, and I'm going to do something I didn't think I was going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you because obviously you've seen a lot of different world champions in your career, and obviously I got the sense that you don't like Mr. Storm. So how does Mr. Storm compare to some other champions that you've crossed paths? Because I get the sense that Mr. Storm, at least from you and certainly Mr. Black's perspective, is kind of an inferior champion. Almost, how can I put it in a way that's not too disrespectful, but doesn't give him too much respect at the same time? From your vantage points, almost like what they call sometimes in sports a paper tiger.
Okay, I get your point in terms of like a paper champion, and I won't go as far as to say that he's a paper champion because
Okay.
I for the little ounce of respect that I have for Jason Storm for one of the previous matches that we did, and just the fact that he's in ROEW, and I value the work and the production that ROEW puts out. I wouldn't say that I like think that he's an inferior champion. I just can't stand his guts. All right. I appreciate because I will give him one thing, and we'll get into this far into this podcast, but he is a good wrestler. And when it comes to
absolutely, listen, I mean, watching his matches, there's no question that in terms of his ring abilities, I would definitely give him a lot of credit. I would definitely never take away his credit in the ring and what he does as a champion. That's obviously why I asked you that question, because you've been around different champions. It's different when, let's say, we have somebody on, and we do a lot of stuff also in England as well with all these different companies, and sometimes you have a wrestler, they may exclusively wrestle for one company or two companies, but you have literally, like I said in the intro, have been almost like the Johnny Cash everywhere man. So you've seen like the real champions, the champions that people watch over and over and over from around the world. That's why I was curious on kind of an up-and-comer in a way, like a Mr. Storm.
Well, I respect him in that aspect. I think Storm is one of the better champions I've seen in backyard wrestling in terms of just his ring ability. He has a lot to do to prove as a champion because he's only just won it. He's barely had any defenses in, But I think he has an opportunity, especially because of how wonderful ROEW actually is in terms of like production, editing.
I'm going to get into that in a few minutes. Absolutely. No question. I 1,000% agree on that point. But go ahead. I'm going to come back to that. But go ahead. You were saying.
No, I was just going to finish off by saying I think Jason Storm has a very unique opportunity to set a precedent for what ROEW is going to look like in the future, but he needs to watch his back because
well, I think he's definitely got to watch his back, and it seems like right now I'm not very good at counting because I'm from Brooklyn, New York, but it seems like it's 2-1. So it seems like you and CJ against Jason Storm. It seems to me as if like you guys got the numbers game. But let me get to a couple of people. They want to say hello, and I'm going to come back to ROEW in a second. Our friends over at BBG Gaming say, Jack Delta, let's go ROEW. The chair needs you. Our interstate openweight champion, James Marshall, tuning in from Wrestling Championship Entertainment. Got a big show coming up, Vindication 2 this weekend. Said, evening, gents, just checking in before work. Our friends from the IMF, my guest Tuesday night, Felix Jones, says hello. And Chris Black, who I think I know this. Okay, never mind that. So we're going to say this individual we think we might know. Say left-handed SMF freak. So I think we have an idea who that individual might be with. I'm not going to
way to spoil your public profile, man.
Well, I made sure I saved that individual. Our friends over at TBW know TBW very well. What's up? Much love, Delta. I'll come back to some of that stuff in a second, but I do want to talk about a point that you made on the overall production of ROEW. And I think that that's one of the things that actually got my attention most because, as you know, I cover a lot of different companies. I don't just cover backyard wrestling, I don't just cover American wrestling, I cover the British independent scene. That's a very, very interesting world. Let me put it to you that way. The quality that I see here in terms of the production, the announce work, the overall ring. And I've said this before. I said this to CJ when he was here Sunday night. I really feel like ROEW has got that up and coming old school, like 1980s kind of NWA, Mid South type of TV setting. Kind of got that ring in your face kind of vibe to it. Now, you've been in a lot of different places. So when I ask you this question, with all due respect to CJ, it's a totally different answer I think I'm going to get. So talk about how we see the value of the editing, the production, that product, and even that ring that we have in ROEW as to why I think this is going to be a company you're going to be here for a long time for. And I think a lot of new people are going to tune into because of the work that's been done in here.
See, that goes to the antithesis of like one of the biggest like things I'm going to say on this podcast because I know you. I know you do a lot of the British independent scene, so I hope
yes, I
these
do.
guys will hop in here so they can understand like where my point comes from with this, and even some of the American people if they happen to be in here too.
Well, the Americans are here. The Americans are here. They are definitely here.
So the biggest difference, in my opinion, because like we'll get into this as well, but I'm trained. I made
Yes,
it.
and I thought that's why I asked you. It's different because there are people that do this and aren't, but you actually became trained, which I think is very fascinating into your career and your story.
Yeah, so I'm trained. I understand what I'm doing, and I understand like as a product, basically the difference between backyard wrestling and independent wrestling is easily the fact that backyard wrestling is a YouTube channel, it's a product.
Absolutely.
Independent wrestling, it's more so you're trying to get yourself over with the promoters.
You're
And
selling
there isn't
tickets.
really,
You're promoting something on
yeah,
behalf of your area. Sure.
yeah, and getting yourself over with the promoters, it's fine. But in terms of like ever going to like rewatch it or promote it on social media and stuff, that's all up to you. You like most of the time when you tune into an independent wrestling show, unless it's on Fight TV, like the only like recording that exists of it is like your grandma who filmed it like 30 yards away.
Sure.
Like in comparison to like backyard wrestling is specifically filmed like a show. It's meant to be a product, and that's why sometimes in terms of like some of the lower ranking backyard people, the wrestling sucks and it's like hard to like watch, but they still have more editing prowess than like independent shows.
Sure. No, there's no question about that. I mean, I think that obviously there's also two different folds. I mean, you're going in and being, as you know, an independent wrestler, you're also looking to move up the circuit, you're looking to network, you're looking to go to different places, and also the promoters also are doing different things to sell tickets. And there's sort of a thing there. I do have some comments. Let me get to people here because people would like to say hello to you. Speaking of people who are up here early, my guest actually tomorrow in your chair, which would be 8 p.m. British Standard Time, the head of talent relations for our friends over at Breakout Pro Wrestling in the UK, Mr. Ben Hampton. He says 4 a.m. in the UK, working on Breakout Pro plans ahead of the 11th, enjoying the show. So if I got a lot to talk about on that show, definitely get to some big-time guys. In fact, one of the guys on that card for the American fans is a guy, Hammerhead Smith, who just wrestled last year at this time the Billington Bulldogs, who are in MLW. So it's a really, really fascinating story that they have. And also at Breakout Pro Wrestling, one of the guys they have here, Sheik El Sham, way back actually wrestled on WWE Raw. He's been on a number of different he's a big time guy. So they've got some big superstars there. I'll definitely get into that on 8 p.m. British Standard Time here on Sportswire Radio. Adonis Felios from Wrestling Championship Entertainment says evening, Tom and Mr. Delta. Prince Charles also says hello, also from
hello.
Our friends over at WC. Adonis would like to say he also watched your history at WWA. So all good stuff there about that. So I want to come back then to ROEW. So you've been at different places, and I thought it was fascinating that you and CJ live like 5 miles apart but didn't know each other, and you kind of just stumbled onto this product. So kind of talk about that, because I heard CJ kind of speak about it, but I thought it was so fascinating. You guys basically are neighbors, and you never knew anything about this, and he had sort of tried this years back and was making a comeback. And talk about it from your vantage point.
So my vantage point was I was up late night with he was another ROEW like guest. His name was Captain Law. He appeared
Yep,
for like an episode or two.
sure.
Him and I are like associates. We'll like hop on calls and stuff. And there was one night that we had found, and anyone who's interested in backyard wrestling, go search this up for yourself because this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. There's someone on YouTube has been compiling every backyard wrestling video you could ever imagine into playlists, and I found backyard wrestling from like Egypt and like
Wow.
Finland and like all of these countries. And when I was digging through the playlist, I happened to notice that one of them said Detroit Riot match. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, like Detroit Riot, there's no way. Cause like when you do gimmick matches in wrestling, it's obviously where you're located. You know,
Sure.
like you're not going to do a Chicago street fight if you're not in Chicago. Like, so I stumbled across it and I'm like, there's no way. And usually when I stumble across like Michigan wrestling, like I came across a different company years ago and I'm like, all right, where are you guys located? And they're like 6 hours away in the UP. And I'm like, oh my God. But ROEW, he sent me the address and I'm like, dude, I literally drive by this all the time. And it just happens to be in this random garage that I've driven by before. So it just goes to show like you have to like be well versed in how to actually research what you're looking for and also have a little bit of luck in terms of finding it.
Sure, absolutely, no question about that. And again, I want everybody to follow ROEW. Please follow them on YouTube at ROEW Backyard Wrestling, also on Instagram as well. And please also give a follow if you're on Instagram out there to Jack Delta. He has certainly been, as I continue to say, as Johnny Cash famously sang, the everywhere man. He is definitely going to be places. So I was also curious, and I didn't really get a chance. Maybe I briefly asked CJ this question, but because you've done so much, do you maybe give him advice on what to do and what not to do? Do you take on that role? Do
So here's
you?
the most surprising part of this. All right. And this he's gonna pop himself when he hears this. But in terms of actual wrestling, even though I'm trained, this
Right.
man has just kind of like become like he slaves away in his dungeon learning how to wrestle.
He was telling me on Instagram. He was telling me like the time he was putting
He
into
knows
this, and I was like,
more.
"Wow,
Like,
okay, this guy is really doing it."
like genuinely, like I can say from like the bottom of my heart, this man knows more about like wrestling and psychology than I do, and I'm trained, and he's never been trained. He's just learned it from watching YouTube videos because he didn't have the graciousness of traveling to 85,000 companies like I have, you know. But on the flip side of that, I teach him, and I've been slowly teaching him what makes the YouTube channel work in terms of like promoting yourself, making proper thumbnails so people actually want to click on the videos, how to build your channel up, like stuff that would make the casual people want to click on backyard wrestling.
Sure.
Because backyard wrestling, and this is like a point that makes me so upset when I see the lower ranks of people who don't know how to wrestle and don't know how to edit. People only ever like click on one type of like genre in their lifetime, and they only give it that one chance, you know. So if you sit here and you click on a backyard wrestling video and you click on like the worst thing you've ever seen, you're going to assume the rest
Oh,
of
listen,
the
first impressions are everything. I actually we've interviewed a lot of musicians on Sportswire. We had I have an in with somebody that had a record deal with Sony Records. So we had for a little while on Sportswire, we were doing these interviews with these different bands, whether it was rappers, whether it was rockers, whoever it might have been, and they would always say, you know, what's the key to any success? It's the first impression. So the first impression, just like in music, that first note you hear, it's either you like it or you don't. If you watch something, Jack, and you're not into it, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go off the page, right?
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't realize that, man. They just have this idea in their head that they have to push out all this content like they're WWE, but it's like no one's gonna watch it if it's not refined. No one's gonna watch it if like the wrestling isn't on. Like, I'm not saying you need to be fucking Zack Sabre Jr., you know, but you gotta have some type of like prowess of knowing how to like lock up and throw a punch and have some type of psychology. Like there have been so many people that I've like gone to like these different companies and stuff. And spoiler alert, every match is supposed to have some type of match structure, and a lot of these backyard people don't know any of that. So when I know I'm traveling to these places, I'm like, I'm doing a lot of extra work to get these matches looking good.
It's funny you said that. As we're here again with Jack Delta, please follow him on Instagram at Jack Delta 1999. If you're out there, please support him and support our dear friends over at ROEW. We want to thank them for giving us the opportunity to speak with the legendary Jack Delta. But what you said is so fascinating because I've had on guys, especially from the British scene, and we're very fortunate to work with a lot of those great companies and those great world champions there. And they always say the same thing, that you could have a guy that Meltzer might say is, 7 out of 5 stars, and you could do 30 crazy spots in a match, but sometimes that's not necessary. They always say there's an old analogy called KISS, keep it simple, stupid, basically where it's all about you build up to that one move. Look at Roman and Sami Zayn at Elimination Chamber. They didn't lock up for, 5 minutes? Look at the beginning of Cody and Roman. So sometimes, that psychology, and I think that what I like about ROEW, and especially on the Weekend Warfare show, and you were a part of that, is that I think CJ is very much into that. CJ is very much, in a way, I see a lot of that Triple H influence. I see a lot of that old Ric Flair influence. I see a lot of that older, guys who were very much based on the slow it down, kind of the psychology part. It reminds me almost of, speaking of Chicago, I watched Steamboat and Flair last night, 2 o'clock in the morning on WWE Network. And you saw a lot of that build up in there and that moment. And I think that that's kind of where this company is going to have the success there. And talk about how important that is for you to have a match with that type of psychology, because you touched upon, and I think there are people that want to hear that.
I can't express in words how important it is to like properly sell everything that you are like accomplishing, whether it be an injury, whether it be the promo work that you're doing, whether it be the backstage segments you happen to be filming. If it goes to the antithesis of like, if you don't believe in yourself and you don't believe what you're doing, how is the audience that you're portraying this for going to ever believe it?
Sure. Absolutely. No, listen,
Because
if you're going to do something, listen, if I kick you, right, and all of a sudden you get right back up, well, what was the point of that, right? I mean, if you do something and all of a sudden you don't basically act like anything happened, what was the point of that? And you're going to kill the entire match like anything else.
Yeah, there is no point to it because like I can't tell you how many times, like even in the independents, I see people who like have like their back or their arm or their leg worked on the entire match, and then by the end of the match, they're like using moves that you would need those like body parts for, and it's fine if you want to do that. And the story is that, like, say for example, you hurt your back, and the idea is you're trying to lift the guy up for an attitude adjustment, but you can't quite do it. That's a story right there. But if you just sit there and hit the attitude adjustment, don't sell your back like you haven't been like worked on the entire match, like what's the point of the match? What are you trying to convey?
Absolutely. No, listen, definitely. I 1000% agree. And that's why I wanted to ask you that, because you've obviously been around. And I've actually heard that from a lot of the wrestlers that come on Sportzwire. I say the same things here, but I have a ton of comments here. People want to say hello. So let me try to get
I keep seeing the thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. Listen, when I do these, that's why a lot of people, I think, like coming to Sportzwire, is because it's not like doing a regular podcast where you kind of get these monotone questions and you're kind of there. And it's like, no, it's almost like people want to get into the action. I really appreciate that here. But Nicholas Crenton is also going to be a part of WC. The now Psycho Wolf Nicholas Crenton says, it's so good to know backyard wrestling has such a variety of stuff to watch in the world. This individual, I think his cover was blown. I popped for no man. Okay, I popped. Mr. Delta, hope you get a chance to subscribe to WC Wrestling Championship Entertainment on YouTube at WC Heat. Omen Black, the IMF World Champion, says, well, if it isn't Jack Delta, he says that's his thoughts here tonight. Matches need structure because otherwise it's just moves. There you go. Nicholas Crenton, one of my favorites, by the way. Nicholas Crenton, Omen Black, they're two of my favorites. These guys know what they're doing. Omen Black was just wrestling as a part of Levi McDaniel's promotion. Levi McDaniel, big guy in the independents and in the Midwest. And this individual, also a big-time star. I guess I can say it. He's the reigning champion of Wrestling Championship Entertainment. That is Craven Rage. He's the all-out champion. He says, hello, Mr. Jack Delta. I really respect your craft, and I've watched your stuff. I know how it feels like to be trained as yourself, and it would be a great honor to have you come to WC. I will definitely ask those questions in a little while for sure. My guest here coming up in the next couple of weeks, Mr. CJ Junt says, "Sup, y'all? Delta, keep up the great work." The Painmaker Joshua Allen, another guy I know I owe an appearance to, says, well, it's Mr. Big Time himself, Jack Delta, and the resident rock star, the RCW champion, Sean Jovi, says yes, meaning he's excited to have you. And he has his own show, which you can find out on RCW Rules on YouTube, as well as Wrestling Championship Entertainment on YouTube at WC. But let me ask you a question, because you see all these wrestlers, right? They're lined up to talk to you tonight. You know,
Yeah.
I do a lot of these interviews, right? And I interview a lot of wrestlers around the world. A lot, it's in America, it's in backyards.
Yeah, I was going to say, of this like chat, I'm pretty sure not a single one of these guys is in the same state.
No, and that was my point. What I was going to get to is that, how does that make you feel? I know you do these stuff all the time. I know you're in different places, but you're hearing from people, either they're peers of yours, they've watched you. I mean, they're here tonight, and I mean, how does that make you feel in a sense? I know it's kind of like off the cuff, but I mean, when you see all these individuals, talk to me about that.
No, okay, so it's a lot to tackle at once, to be honest, because it's like two sides of a coin. On one side of the coin, right, I absolutely appreciate that, like, I've been able to carve out such a niche for myself that all of these like random avatars on my computer screen want to work with me in some capacity.
Oh, I'm sure you get more requests than I guess Kim Kardashian does in her DM box these days.
Just about, man. It's just I appreciate all the like wanting to work with me, and all the different people that like send me different types of requests, and
Right.
People who just reach out and talk about just like my matches, which are the ones I really appreciate, are the people that just reach out and actually talk about behind the scenes stuff, or people that have happened to wrestle, or just experiences and stuff. But on the opposite side of it, it's overwhelming to a certain extent.
Oh, I'm sure. Listen, I would have no doubt that that's the case here. And I want to say hello to a lovely young lady from the state of New Jersey, big wrestling fan, Christine Firko. I believe I got her name right. Always liking my stuff. She also does some stuff for the New York Giants. She's a big wrestling fan. She'll probably be watching AEW, which she always does. And I hope one day she could come on Sportswire Radio, but I could probably one day hope to say hello to her for other ways. But that's okay. We'll move on from that. But we're talking about your matches here, and a lot of them, and I'll definitely get into them here in a few minutes. And I thought it was so fascinating that you said you didn't really watch a lot of the companies that you work for, or when it comes to your own matches. That I'm curious, do you go back, because you have so many matches out there? You have hundreds of matches on YouTube. I could probably spend my entire next month watching your whole career. Do you go back and watch these matches to kind of help you in terms of where you plan and plot for the future?
Very occasionally. Sometimes I'll go back and I'll rewatch them just to see if there's any spots that I want to like call back to from a specific match. But I try not to, because I'm like, just as like for shoot skis, pretty busy person. I have a lot.
Oh, I would imagine. I mean, you're wrestling countless places. You've also got, I'm sure, a life and other responsibilities, and it makes it difficult to go back and look at this point, that point, and so on. And I just thought it was interesting to ask you.
No, that's a good point. That's a good question, because I do have. The last time I checked, I had about 200 matches across all of YouTube somewhere, between all the different companies and stuff. And I'd say, and see, this is another thing too that I'll get into. I'll just brush over and stuff. Is I think the first half of my career isn't really that good. Like, a lot of the stuff that I did was not. I wasn't very trained. I didn't understand what I was doing. My attire used to be atrocious. It was just like I'd get off school.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that, because I've been in it for 4.5 years. And if you go back and listen to my original shows, which are on SoundCloud.com/The Sports Report 2019, they sound like almost like a cat going into screaming into a microphone. So I'm not going to compare myself. So I'll let you slide.
Oh man, but that's one thing that I don't enjoy. Is I have this like ability to actually like sit here and critique myself and say that some of my matches are bad, and like even if I have like a stinker every now and again, because I'm working with a new guy, or just like the match didn't go to plan and stuff, I feel like backyard wrestlers and even indie people will share that around like it's like the WrestleMania main event, when it's like you kind of need to push that one under the rug, brother. You know what I
Well,
mean?
well, I think the difference is that you have a countless resume worth of matches. You talk about even the independents, and when it comes to, again, I can reference the British independents, for example. I mean, I cover a lot of guys, and there are only certain companies that I could go out honestly and watch that card as it is live because of what you spoke about. There really isn't that ability to edit. There isn't that ability to own your own library, your own information. So you only get, if you're lucky, certain guys, I won't name names, give me something because somebody taped something. I can watch it on YouTube, but there's a link that you can't really share. And, there
Yeah.
are different things like that. There are other companies that put their stuff on Instagram Live and they don't put it on YouTube because of editing purposes and time. So I totally understand that. So I could certainly see your points there. I do have some more comments because people do want to say hello. Watching your stuff, Jack, makes me want to not only step into the ring with you, but also pick your brain to see what more I can learn. Also, we'd love to have you sometime in Tennessee, Delta. Reach out to us. Delta, I'd imagine you'd watch your new matches when they're on the. That's a good question, though. When you have a new match, so example, the last match we saw you win against Jason Storm, have you watched that match back?
Typically, when I watch my matches, like the newer matches that come out, I'm not really like I'll watch it one time just to understand like my performance in it and what I could have done better. Because like I don't know if, and this is for the wrestlers in here, like when you go out and you do a match, I'm not saying like my brain's smooth, but when I get when I get done with the match, I'll remember parts of it, but I don't remember the entire match. Like I kind of like, have you ever seen that movie Click with Adam Sandler?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. I
So you
remember
know
very
how like
well.
in
Yeah.
certain points of his life he'll click the remote and it just kind of
Yep.
skips over everything.
Yep.
That's me with wrestling at this point. So especially when it's like a taping, when I've like wrestled 18,000 matches,
Oh,
I've got
I'm
to,
sure.
when the live comes back out, I watch it once to see my performance in it and what I can do better. But then anytime that like if you go through my like search history on my phone and stuff, you'll see that like all the companies I wrestle for are there. But I'm usually only going there to see the live chat in the comments and seeing if I get a reaction for what I did. Because if I didn't, that means I need to do something different.
Sure, I could totally understand that here. And this individual, I think he's joking because we don't want to do that because that would be really egotistical. And I'm going to plead the fifth on that one because I have interviewed a lot of people, but I'm going to plead the fifth on that one. I mean, but let me ask you though, there is a point here that I thought Nicholas Crenson made, especially for the wrestler. Maybe if they're not watching it live, but they go back and watch it, because there are people who are going to watch this definitely when it airs on YouTube. It's already on there, but obviously when it's on and forever on. And do you get asked a lot to give advice to other matches? Like for example, in ROEW, you have Storm, you have C Money, for them as examples. You mentioned CJ, but do you get asked in the different companies that you're in to maybe give advice on maybe a wrestler's match? I mean, Scott Hall was asked this once in a podcast he did, and sometimes he would go up actually, and the wrestlers would ask him for advice, and he would give it to him. Other times, he would actually just go up and say, "Hey, here's what you're doing here." So, I mean, talk to me about that.
Um, I have a lot of people that message me for advice and like want to sit down and like actually like go through their matches, but it is, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, it is incredibly hard to actually articulate what I want to say when they're not trained at all.
Sure.
Because there's a lot that you have to go through. Because it's like first they'll send me a match, and firstly they don't know anything about match structure, so the entire thing is just a back and forth move fest. You know what I mean? It's just like this guy gets a shine in, this guy gets a shine in. There's no actual heat in the match. It's just a bunch of random shit. So it's really hard to judge that off rip. But then a lot of the times there's this thing that I like to do, and I can actually do it with my camera here. In backyard wrestling, this is guy one, this is guy two. All right, guy one will hit a move, guy two's back up. He'll hit a move, and then he's back up, and they'll just do this until the ending. And then a lot of the time
It's
there's
like a
also
tennis match almost, where you're hitting the ball above the net. You're waiting for somebody to almost not be able to hold serve.
yeah, and it's hard to describe, but a lot of people in the backyard scene specifically, and even in the independent scene, they almost play wrestler, where it's like they sell and they act as if they'd imagine a wrestler would be doing that instead of being in pain. for a lot
Interesting.
of stuff that they do. Like they're not vocal enough, or they'll like sell something really goofy. Like they'll take, like, my favorite one is like people take that flare bump all the
Oh
time.
yeah, sure. Yeah, no, the flare.
You know, it's just it's stuff like that. So like people send me their matches all the time, and it's really hard to like actually like sit down and critique a lot of it because I'm watching it from like almost a fully trained view.
Absolutely, which I thought was again fascinating to ask you because you've been in that moment, and I know you get because you've wrestled in so many companies. Because people say, "Well, Jack Delta. Well, Jack Delta, what did you think about my match, Jack Delta? What can I do?" And again, I thought it was fascinating. It reminded me so much again when Scott Hall was in that position. Even Shawn Michaels, believe it or not, Shawn Michaels. A lot of people would have thought in the first stint that he would not have given advice, but he was very good with that. I was listening to a couple of different wrestlers speak about that, so I thought it was interesting. But people do want to say hello. I want to give a big shout out to the Atomic Freaking Titan. The Atomic Freaking Titan says Jack Delta, and certainly I think I know what that emoji is. Jack Delta, CJ. Well, I'm not going to get into that because I think Jack Delta and Mr. Black, they're friends right now in ROEW. They're working for a common goal here, which is to rid themselves of Mr. Storm. So I think that's kind of here the point here. This individual is calling you dad.
Oh
So
my
his
god,
name.
that's my son.
Oh wow. Okay, I know you
No,
have a
he's not
son.
actually my son,
I
but
was gonna say, wow, you have a son. Holy. I was gonna say, wow, I didn't realize you were that old.
yeah.
But maybe you're old in wrestling years, but not old in real years. I can vision a future dream one-on-one with Jack Delta inside a WC ring. You never
Well,
know.
to be
It's
fair, with the
out there.
WCE thing, I
Mhm.
feel like I remembered messaging them on Facebook because I believe they're in Wisconsin.
Yes, Appleton, Wisconsin. Craven Rage is their champion. They're actually right now having a show coming up this weekend. It's going to be called Vindication 2. They actually have some talent that's coming up later this summer. One of them is a guy, Skulls, from California. And they're also working with a company called the IMF, which just worked with Levi McDaniel, big time independent guy. And their champion, you heard from, is Omen Black. And Soldier GP is their DKW champion. Those two companies are kind of like, to me, the two up and coming backyard companies right now that seem like they're on the move and they're doing things to kind of get themselves out there.
And I always appreciate that, having these people like pop up completely out of nowhere and get this new hype surrounding them, and getting all these people that want to come out to them and stuff. And but it always makes it really funny because it's just like I'll hear of somebody from like a completely different state that I've never been to, like a Wisconsin or like an Iowa, and I'm like, no offense to you guys, but it's like, what the fuck do you do in Iowa? You know, like.
I mean, well, Slipknot's from Iowa. To be fair, as I was pointing out, Slipknot is from Iowa, so it's not all. Seth Rollins is from Iowa, so I mean, there is, some points there. But I'll ask you a question. I'll kind of help you dodge out of that whole Iowa sucks thing. But when it comes to traveling to these different states and you're not from there, I found it fascinating. You're in WCF. You go there. You wrestle in Texas. You wrestled in places like Alabama. I
Mhm.
heard Georgia, New Jersey, which is not too far from me actually, and other places I'm sure you'll be at. And what's that experience like, just going to these places you've never been to and just going there and spending time in a place you have like no familiarity with to wrestle? And what is that like?
Oh, dude, it is life changing, man. It is one of the weirdest things you can experience because I do it even weirder than most people normally do it. Because when you set up all these trips, you're gonna have to like sit here and either drive out there, rent a hotel, and then meet up with the guys for dinner, and then go and wrestle them and stuff. It's like, no, the reason I'm able to make it to the places that I'm able to make it is the graciousness of the people that I wrestle with. Because a majority of the time, I fly out and they pick me up and I stay with them for shoot skis. So that's how I'm able to like keep it like relatively cheap because I'm not fucking Bill Gates. I don't have like 10,000 bajillion dollars to spend.
I was wondering that because I'm like, how is this guy doing that and he's staying there? I mean, for me, if I were to go out there, I'm a little more fortunate in life, but I mean, I was just so fascinated by that because even when you're an independent wrestler, and we've had guys on in England, they'll tell me I drive 6 hours here, 4 hours there, and I'm not getting any money. And I was like, how are you from your vantage point pulling this all off?
Yeah, I can't do that, man. I mean, I've had 10,000 offers to do things like that, but it's always I have to say no. And it's just like I find it in the philosophy of like, if you're willing to like let me come out and wrestle in your backyard, I feel like staying with you isn't as weird as that. You know what I mean?
Sure. I could totally see that here, and I do have some more comments. And uh, TBW says, "Yo, Delta is the future ROBW champion. I don't care what Storm says." Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, because CJ can't get his shot, so maybe it's gonna happen here sooner rather than later. We'll have to find out. ROBW Backyard Wrestling on YouTube. Also follow them on Instagram. Jack Delta 1999 as well on Instagram. Nicholas Cranston says, when I put together a match with someone, I always try to think of what the story is we want to tell and how do we tell it. Kind of what you said earlier. Atomic Titan kind of laughs at the Bill Gates reference there. It sounds like Craven Rage is telling us that Jack Delta and WCE they would definitely be interested in. So that's maybe something everybody could work on off the air and down the road. Obviously, those are possibilities that could always happen here. But if you are on Sportswire Radio, I'd like you to give us a like and follow on Facebook at Sportswire Radio. Over 600 followers. I appreciate everybody's support over the past 4.5 years. Also, YouTube, we're out there at Sportswire Radio. Gotten a lot of new subscribers the last few months. I appreciate that. And also 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player. We play music, we play talk, we simulcast these shows here. I format all of the stuff and we give people, the little guys, a chance to air their podcast on a worldwide radio dial. So check us out here anytime. And I'll be back here, as I mentioned, tomorrow. Now, today, UK time and also Eastern time with Breakout Pro Wrestling's head of talent relations. That'll be Mr. Ben Hampton. I'll also be back here Sunday night with a guy you might have heard of, 9 p.m. Eastern time, the Nemesis James Taylor. The Nemesis James Taylor. Interesting individual here. We're going to be with Mr. Taylor, and he's kind of a YouTube, TikTok phenomenon. So we'll have Mr. Taylor. He's got a lot to talk about here. He's always got something to say, and he'll be here with us 9 p.m. But right now, we are having a great time here with Jack Delta, the everywhere man who has wrestled in 18 companies in 7 different states. You know, I was curious about that, and what inspired you to actually want to go and wrestle for all these different companies?
It was one experience, and that's the best part. Is we can do the whole origin story thing here.
Absolutely.
When I did not know until I was 16 years old that backyard wrestling even existed. I didn't have the graciousness of like all these people who grew up watching KBW or ESW or Grimm's Toy Show. I didn't know any of this shit existed. I just happened to go to school with one of the guys in MEBW. And he randomly one day was just like, "Hey Kyle," it's my name. "Hey Kyle, listen, I got a wrestling thing going on. I know you like wrestling. So just show up to my place. You can be a referee or something." And I'm like, "Okay, sick. This is awesome." I didn't do anything. I didn't do any training. I just got into wrestling. Like, I'm going to be in WWE in like 2 days. So I get to his house and I'm expecting, like, he gave me his address. So I'm like, oh, so I'm meeting up with him and then we're going to like drive to the venue or whatever. And I get to his backyard and I'm like, what's all this shit? There's like light tubes everywhere. There's like stop signs. I seen like the setup for like somebody be set up on fire. I'm like, dude, what is happening? So I look over at him like, where's the ring? And there was no ring. He didn't even have a ref shirt. I was just some guy standing in his backyard doing like a last man standing thing. And him and my friend, most unsafe stuff I've ever seen in my life, just beat the dog shit out of each other. But that leads into the reason it inspired me. So I went and I did MEBW, which is like what I'm primarily, at least
I was going to say that there has been people, and that's how I first heard of you, actually. And I was speaking with different people off the air. I shall name nameless here, but they actually said, "Oh, I know him from MEBW." So that's kind of where you got your calling there. Before we go into some other companies,
yeah. So, which is weird because I was also going to comment this too. Is just like, I've been doing this so long and I've been so many places that like I assume everyone knows me from MEBW, but like some people will hit me with like, oh, they know me from like WWA, or they know me from WCEF, or they know me from that one time I went to ESW. Like, it's just like
on EBW. Listen, you had a big time feud with Executioner. I mean, I think you have like 10,000 views on a match there or two, and I think you have another one with like 7,000 out there.
Yeah, there's one of the craziest matches I've ever done, which was, it was me. Who was my partners? It was me, Logan Cross, and Reaper versus Maximus Roman, Matt Thunder, and Joe McDonald was a special guest referee. It was a 6-man, anything goes crazy match. And as soon as the bell rang, hurricane weather hit, and it started raining. So we're just wrestling in the rain. It has like 10,000 views. It's the ring turned into a slip and slide. It was one of the craziest matches I've ever been in. But that's a good segue though, because the reason that I do all this traveling is I had an awesome experience with doing the buildup of the first MEBW versus EBW Worlds Collide, which is like, people can say what they want, about like all this like crossover stuff and all these different talents going here and there and the other thing. But MEBW actually traveling to EBW for as far as we were from Michigan to New Jersey was unheard of for backyard wrestling. Like usually like crossover stuff is relegated to like, oh, there happens to be 2 companies in New York.
Right. Or, for example, I was growing up in Brooklyn, and we sort of did, I can't say to the equivalent of you guys, but we would kind of like, a bunch of us would wrestle, and we lived on one block, and maybe we'd try to find a couple of people who lived up the block from us. And that was our thing we called block wars. I mean, but this is totally different. You guys are going into different states. I mean, it's, DKW and IMF are doing it. They're in Ohio and Iowa, and WCE and IMF are Wisconsin and Iowa. And what you guys did with EBW and also MEBW, it's almost like unheard of if you think about it.
Yeah, because this was back in, if I got my timelines right, this was like 2017, 2018. Yep. So this was like years before even most of these companies were even established. So it's like doing that and then going to New Jersey and wrestling with all these people and then like slowly finding out, because like I was the one who bridged out and found all the other like crossover talent that we happened to work with after that point. Because it was like, I wasn't even the one who initiated this stuff with EBW. It was my friend, Matt Thunder. And after we did that, it was life-changing, because it was just like, not only are we relegated to wrestling with people that we have here in Michigan in our company, we have the ability to go literally anywhere if we can find the means there. And so I see it almost as kind of like, almost like a checklist of places that I want to hit, because eventually I don't know if it's going to be feasible. I don't know if I can hit all of them, especially because fucking Alaska, but I want to hit as many states as I can before I retire. So like,
I would think you have a long way to go. I don't see you retiring next year. So hopefully, you would have that opportunity to go into these different states. Has that made you a better wrestler by wrestling these different talents? Obviously, some talents are going to have, I guess, more talents than others, or more abilities, or more experience. But I mean, how has that made you in terms of for your overall career and your overall in-ring abilities by wrestling these different talents as you have, whether it's been EBW, WCF, WWA, now in ROEW, and so on and so on? How has that made you in terms of honing your craft?
They challenge me in different ways, because some places I go and they're further along in their training than I was. Because like the first like 4 or 5 companies I went to, I sucked. So it's like, I don't look too, like in terms of wrestling, I don't look back on them too fondly, because I wasn't where I am now. But every single one of them pose a completely different challenge, because some of them are like, they're super trained guys, but they're on a trampoline. Some of them are completely unsafe guys, but they're on the ground. Some of them they're relatively trained guys, but they're in a homemade ring, so the ring sucks. It's just like every single company that I go to is a completely different beast to tackle. And that's half of the fun of it.
And that was so interesting. And I know I have comments. I have a lot of comments from people. I'm going to get to them in a second. But I watched you, which was so fascinating. I've watched you in ROEW, which I think ROEW's got, it looks like to me, and I said this to CJ, and I mean this is a complete compliment. It feels like I'm watching a pro show. That ring CJ has, in a lot of ways, he's lucky to have what he has. I think he's done a phenomenal job with his setup with that. So you've got one style with that. I've seen you wrestle on the trampoline. I've seen you wrestle in, I guess, these rings that are like almost like square box looking rings. They're not the standard size, but they're almost like, how can I put it, just a little bit bigger than like a Major League Baseball strike zone. It's kind of, that's what they look like. So it's almost like if you remember like playing like a video game, almost like with a pinball game, almost like one of those kind of things. So like, how do you adjust? Because you're a big guy. You're a big guy that, does these different things. And obviously you've got a certain style that you look to do. And I mean, how do you adjust yourself to like these different almost rings, or maybe even different types of settings and everything else in between?
Well, I find it a challenge, and a lot of my moveset is based off of being able to adapt anywhere. So like, even though I'm a big guy, a lot of my moveset should consist of slams, right? Because
Right. Yeah.
picking up a ton of people and slamming them and stuff, but like on the ground, it's not super feasible. So you have to like work around that.
Although you
by
did to
having,
execution, you did the one where you kind of like dropped him down. He was like right on the side of the ropes. I thought that was like you were conscious of that point you just made.
yeah, it's hard to adapt to like ground is the worst one because the ground there's nothing you can do. Like homemade wings.
That's like when I was a kid playing tackle football on cement. People were like, "What are you doing?" Well, that's you're hitting the ground. It's gonna hurt. I mean, there's no way around that. You can't fake that. You're not faking gravity.
Yeah, it just sucks. There's no workaround with that. And like
Yep.
trampoline work, it's just like I don't care what anyone says. I will wrestle on a trampoline for the rest of my life. It's goofy. Everyone knows it doesn't hurt. You know what I mean? But I dare anyone my size to actually get up on a trampoline and do what I do because the
Yeah, I thought
balance
that
is
was
fine.
like so fascinating watching you and Sean Morgan in WCF on the trampoline and watching like the different spots and even like the grabbing of the like it would normally be the ropes, but you had like I guess the spring to the trampoline. I thought that stuff was like so fascinating to me. I was
Yeah,
like,
and see with
that was
like ground
interesting.
stuff and trampoline stuff, you completely wipe out the ability of anything with ropes and anything with like turnbuckles and all of that stuff. So you have to work a match without those. And it's almost like each different place has its own type of handicap. You know what I mean? And being able to like perform a halfway decent match for what backyard wrestling is supposed to be is a challenge. And that's what I find so fun about it.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, and I want to give a shout out to somebody else listening, big wrestling fan from the state of California, Anastasia Riznia said she's become so fascinated by what you and others have done. She's from California out there, so it's prime time for her. But let me say hello to people. People do want to
Okay.
talk to you. As a fellow ginger, I should be pulling for Storm. However, I'm not left-handed. Delta gonna finally win. And I think CJ's coming on here right around June the 14th. I have, so that'll be a fun interview with CJ. So
Oh
looking
yeah, I
forward
love
to speaking
CJ.
with CJ. CJ's a great guy. James Taylor comes up, and James Taylor is tuned in here. I think Atomic wants to say, "What would you do when you go one-on-one with the nemesis, James Taylor?" Am I able to throw that out there? James Taylor is here before I get to everybody else. First of all, I'm sure you've heard of Mr. Taylor. Is that correct?
Everyone's heard of Mr. Taylor.
All right, so Mr. Taylor has been a frequent participant on Sportswire. He's coming on Sunday. He's kind of locked in, I guess, with this sort of battle with IMF. He's wrestled Anthony Steele, wrestled pretty much everybody you could think of out there, right? And I mean, is James Taylor somebody on your list of people you'd want to wrestle? And Mr. Taylor, the 23-year pro, he's the Stone Cold Steve
All right, no,
Austin.
I'm going to pause you there. All right,
All right, go
I
ahead.
love James Taylor, and I will one of these days find my way to wherever the hell James Taylor's even from and wrestle him.
Tennessee,
But
I believe. TBW.
TBW, all right. I will find my way there one day, and I will wrestle him. But the
Okay.
the issue that I have with Mr. Taylor here is he like fronts these like accolades. He says he is a 23-year vet,
Yes, I've heard. Yes, we've heard
but
that here live on Sportswire.
but he wrestled for 2 or 3 years, and then he took like a 17-year break, and then wrestled for 3 or 4 years. That is not 23 years. Take that number minus the years you didn't wrestle. That's how many years you've been in the business.
So I guess if it's in dog years, does it count to 23? Because he wrestled in what, like 5? I'm not good on dog math, but maybe the
Yeah,
dog
no,
math
that
counts.
implies that he's a dog, but dog compared to goat, who's going to win, James?
Well, there's no question that you certainly probably have more matches if there was an internet wrestling database. You'd probably have those more matches there. Backyard super shows need to come back. I think maybe we'll see that this summer, right somewhere. CPW is a great Jersey Fed. Our friend from England, who's up by the way, 5:25 a.m. with a trainee for GT Ministries, Casey Jack Bradley. He says hello.
Oh, hello,
Hopefully,
hello.
Wisconsin. I think people are really pushing you for Wisconsin. I've noticed tonight it's been Wisconsin and James Taylor's now come up all of a sudden here. Mr. Taylor says hello here. Anything you want to say to Mr. Taylor? Because now he's officially tuned in here.
Now he's officially tuned in, dude. I've said enough to James Taylor. This man, he invades my Instagram lives. He invades my private group phone calls. Wish
Hey,
video. I will.
how did he invade your private phone calls? How did he have a connection with that?
Well, thank Atomic Titan for that, because every time I'm like in a private call with Atomic Titan and a few friends, out of nowhere I see this big blockhead pop up on like a fourth screen. and we don't all know who it
Did
is.
he? Well, did he show you the Stone Cold VHS and DVD collection here? Because he's been showing. He was showing us last week his Stone Cold collection. Then he was reciting I think a 1998 Stone Cold promo to us off the air when we had the IMF guys with us. So hopefully,
But he did tell me he had 23,000 YouTube subscribers, and I was like, wow,
29,500 now. By the way, 29,500.
yeah, gotta get that right. He told me it was backyard wrestling, but then I went and watched it, and it was like WWE shorts. So
Yeah, it's mostly like
saying,
he does game streaming. He did his own podcast for a bit, so it's a number. It's not so much on the backyard stuff, but he is a little bit of an internet celebrity. So we do want to make sure people can follow him, Taff_Taylor on Instagram, Taff Taylor on YouTube. We'll definitely talk with him Sunday night. He says now it's 30,700. So when I had him last week, it was 29,500. Now it's 30,700. I stand corrected. Probably 31,000 then by Sunday. Casey Jack Bradley says maybe we can see you in the UK. Actually, you know what? I should ask you a different question. Are you now? I know a little bit about the UK backyard wrestling scene. I know it for different reasons, but are you familiar with that scene over there? Has it ever been a place you would visit? Because I do have my British people that have tuned in, and they obviously have been really my biggest champions in my career have been the people in England. I cannot stress that enough. They have been really my champions.
UK. I know there's okay, so like outside of America, I know there's been scenes in Canada that I followed.
Yeah.
I know there's been scenes in Australia.
Yes, Australia's had a big scene, by the way.
And I found one in Japan. I've been waiting for that one for forever, but
wow, okay.
I can't say for certain that I've actually. There might be a company or two that might be slipping my mind, but like the UK backyard scene, no, I don't know much about.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. Obviously, people want to see in different places, and I want to just make sure that we get a chance to say hello to those people. Titan equals Mark. Okay, so that's fair play here. And we have here gaming equals 5 views, wrestling equals 20, and WWE equals 20,000. So he's kind of breaking down the James Taylor breakdown here. And he says, right, but it's actually some of my promos have over 1K a piece, some have 6K. You know, I want to ask you then, coming back to you, and we referenced the matches with Executioner. You worked there in EBW and most notably of WCF. I caught some of that stuff there. So when you get these matches of yours that have these many views, what does that mean to you, like on a personal level? I mean, how does that make you feel in your journey and such, knowing that like thousands and thousands of people around the world have watched a match of yours? How does that make you feel?
I couldn't ask for anything more. It makes me feel wonderful because it's just it means whatever I did worked, and the match that I wanted to convey, the story that I wanted to convey, putting the person over. Usually, a lot of the times, the matches that I usually have are putting people over. Believe it or not, despite all the accomplishments, whatever. But I get to choose, I get to go on to YouTube, find these companies that like people either love or don't love or whatever, and work with these guys and choose who I get to put over. And then they get thousands and thousands of views and comments and admiration and stuff. And then I can take all of the clout from that and not necessarily put it on myself, but take it and put it on a different channel that I think deserves that spotlight. And it's just like a continual train.
You know, it's funny you said that, and there are certain, or a philosophy, I should say, that there are some wrestlers, and the ones I think that are successful believe that you should give back and give the other person the rub to help them. It's almost kind of in a way like wrestling, the term we've used here in the 2.5 to nearly 3 years I've been covering it on Sportswire, is almost like an apprenticeship. Is it important for you, even though you're this big name, Jack Delta, you've had all these championships, you got all this admiration? I'm going to get to that in a little while as well, but is it important to you philosophically to help those wrestlers kind of get the rub from you and maybe help those companies in a way to give back, a la like an apprenticeship?
Yeah, no, it's one of the most important things that you can do, because if you spend an entire legacy, if you spend 20 years in say WWE, you never put anybody over, and you give everyone you never get to tell the story of someone eventually beating you and overcoming this entire challenge. It's what's the point? I mean, there are a lot of times too that I'm not going to name specific names, but there are a lot of times too that I feel like I should be more specific in terms of who I put over, because uh, I feel like sometimes it's wasted. I feel like sometimes it's like the wrong person. It's not the right time. This, that, or the other thing. And I do it out of the graciousness of like, I'm going to their company. Um, I'm basically being on their roster, and they book me how they see fit. If I didn't have enough value in it, then I wouldn't go. But it's just, I feel there are certain times that other people are better suited, or I could theoretically be higher up on the card, but that's a different topic.
Sure, sure. And obviously, look, I could completely understand that. We were actually, I don't want to say names, but there was a wrestler this past week in England that he was wrestling another wrestler. And they've been on Sportswire many times, and they were in a world championship match. And the champion was defending it in a 6-man tag match, which I thought was completely goofy. And the challenger actually won.
Pause. Like a 6-man, like a 3v3.
Yeah, so basically, I don't want to name this company because Casey Jack Bradley will know who it is, and there'll be somebody that'll catch it. And I had some disagreements here with the wrestler that was in question, but it was a champion of this company, GT Ministries. I let it slip out of the bag, and they had their champion defend it in a 6-man tag elimination match. And the stipulation was if the champion had won the match, the challenger would have joined his group. But what wound up happening was while the challenger won the title, they had this other wrestler who had their own version of Money in the Bank cash in on him, and he wound up winning the title and losing it like 5 minutes later because another wrestler who had beat the champion at the last big show wanted his own match. And the way I had thought the whole thing was booked was like, I don't want to get in trouble because I know this will come back to me. I thought it was total garbage. I just thought
No,
that
I'll say it right now. You know what that reminds me of? That if you wouldn't have told me it was an indie company, that sounds like WCW in the 2000s.
it's actually on my Instagram message to that wrestler. I actually said that to
Yeah,
the,
dude,
to
it
the
sounds
wrestler
like
in
a night where
question.
like Booker T drops the title to Scott Steiner, who just
Yes,
gives it to Vince Russo.
exactly. And they were building this story. So this is where it comes back to you. They were building up this big storyline with these two guys. They were the big feud of the company these last 5 or 6 months. For 18 months, they were building the challengers in this main event. He wins the title anticlimactically and drops it 5 minutes later to this champion, this guy who doesn't talk. He's this monster but can't talk. So my philosophy is always you should always have a champion that can talk. But I don't want to get in trouble with that because we work with this company. So the point is going back to what you were saying. I think it's important that you work with people you want to work with so that you can give back to them. And one of the companies that I think that you've done some interesting work with of late, which I thought was so fascinating, was WCEF, where you
Yes.
wrestled like a million matches in a short amount of time. And
Yeah.
you did this in Texas of all places. I mean, in the
Yes.
middle of Texas. And talk about that experience and how did that maybe make you in terms of being a wrestler, in terms of your craft?
So WCEF was one of my most like positive experiences that
Yeah,
I've
it's a
had.
very good matches there. Those were some of the matches I got a chance to watch here. Really enjoyed that work.
Yeah, and it's because I can look past the fact that they're on a trampoline and that they're like trying to convey stuff, you know. Um WCEF is such a phenomenal place to work for, man. I wish more people would appreciate trampoline wrestling for what it is, because everybody gets this like fascination of they work on a trampoline, they see one like backyard fed with a ring, and then they're like get a ring, and then it ruins their company because they can't work on a trampoline. So what they're doing is they're just hurting themselves in a ring. Like I worked for a company in Michigan that did that exact same thing, and I've stopped working for them for that reason. Um, but WCEF, I had watched little of. I'd watched some of their like here, there, the other, where like not many people in the backyard scene were really even talking to them.
Sure.
Um, but one of my biggest fans, Apache King,
I was gonna
he
get to him. I was gonna get to
yeah,
him in a few minutes.
Apache King, kept telling me, he just swore up and down on his life that WCEF reminded him of a very early stage of my company that I'm from. So I didn't buy into it, to be honest, for a while. I just kind of just let it ride out. And then I started watching their stuff, and I thought some of it was mid, but they posted this one show, and I don't know if it was the fact that they did it in front of a crowd for the first time, but it just clicked for me. Like the wrestling was on point, the character work was on point, the
And the
storytelling.
commentating, by the way, phenomenal commentating. Phenomenal.
Yes, dude. The commentary is literally like I think their commentary is better than AEW. Like,
It was very good. I have to say, just in watching your stuff there, the commentating, because I always catch that most, and I thought it was like almost like a snap, crackle, and pop.
yeah, and so I finally figured it out. I finally wanted to work with them, and this was around the time I had just gotten through most of my training. I'd got hurt, and so I was like on the come up of like figuring out where I wanted to go and what I could do, and I finally like bought the ticket, set everything up that I needed to go out there, and I started working for them. And I went out there, I believe it was last September. I went out there and I worked for them, and I get there and you can just kind of tell when you watch a channel that like the people behind the screen, you can tell if they want to be there or not.
Right, sure.
And they basically adopted me into their family. Like they were just like the closest group of friends you could possibly imagine. And so I knew the second I touched down, I started talking with them that it was going to work. And in that weekend, I wrestled, I believe, 22 matches, tag matches, singles matches. That's not counting segments. That's not counting promos. That's not counting doing the promo pictures and all the stuff that entails with like being on screen, you know. That doesn't account for like a party I went to afterwards. Like, like it's insane how much stuff I pack into like a weekend like that. Like my recovery rate is usually like a week for like the time I get back.
Sounds like the old WWF days when they would tape like Wrestling Challenge, Superstars. They would tape all those old segments back in the day. Like McMahon would just have all the wrestlers like in the 1 or 2 days they weren't going out to travel for house shows and just book all that stuff for a month. Sounds like a WCF thing there.
Yeah, dude. Well, people make exceptions for me because they want me on their screen, and most places usually tape once a month, and they'll just have the content for the month or whatever.
Right, sure.
And so when they come to accommodate me, it's kind of like they have to tape all the stuff they already were gonna do. But then I'm like, all right, listen, like the trip I just got back from like last weekend. I'm not gonna say where it was, but between the few companies that I wrestled for, I wrestled 11 matches. And
wow.
This one's the credence too. Like people can shit on the WCF stuff because it was on trampoline. All these were in the ring. So you wrestle 11 matches and then tell me like I can't do this. But no, where was I at with this?
But how does your body almost recover from something like that? Because, I have guys on here and they wrestle, let's say, 3 times a month. Maybe we had, I don't know, spoil out of the bag, Disciple, the GT Ministries champion, the Enso champion, wrestles twice in one day. Okay, but then he doesn't wrestle until next week, but then he's off for 1 week and then he comes back on. So, I mean, how do you pull something off like that? 11 matches in a condensed period of time. I mean, you might be a young man. How do you pull that off? God.
It's number one, it's stamina. It's like
Okay.
I go to the gym, then like actually like work towards making my body better. And even more than my body, like my mind, like I meditate and I do all that stuff to make sure like I'm good to go everywhere I go.
Sure.
But 2, I also value the way that I work in terms of my matches most of them aren't crazy bump intensive. Like I save my spots usually for the end of the match. And when I do it, it's usually relatively safe bumps for both people involved. It's not like I'm sitting here doing crunchies off the ring apron every match.
No, but there's still something where, you can't fake pain. You can't fake your body moving and doing all those things. I mean, you could be the safest person, but still you're mentally and physically putting your body through a lot. That's why I thought it was fascinating to kind of ask you that question. I'm sure you get asked that often, maybe in different circles and places, but I do have people that want to say hello, and I feel like I should do that. Josh Allen Mr. Taylor are kind of going back and forth, so I'll leave them at that. A great match will end up getting both wrestlers over. That's why Nicholas Crenton's one of our favorites, also on Sportswire.
Mhm.
Wrestling is like building armor and arming yourself with weapons and building your arsenal. You just need the right materials and weapons.
Mhm.
What do you all think of TBW's comment? TBW's
I
right
love
up there
TBW
also.
commentary.
TBW has got great production. I'll have to check out WCF's commentary again. My favorite right now is TBW's. Although that guy that's doing the work in ROEW, he ain't too bad right now. That guy,
Yeah.
whoever he is doing not too bad work. And I'll have an ROEW announcement at the end of the show here in a little while. Anthony Steele says, "What's good, Delta?" I know you know Mr. Steele very well, the real deal Anthony Steele. The GTM, which I think he knows the match I'm talking about, was comparable to the finish of New Year's Revolution, where John Cena was the last man standing and Edge cashes in like that. Yeah, but it was still. I didn't like the
Yeah,
ending.
no,
I'm not gonna.
that 6-man thing is probably the worst thing I've heard of in terms of like booking philosophy. Since I heard there was this one indie company around me that
Yeah,
did.
that's why I don't want to get into it because somebody's going to message me on Facebook because I actually got asked my thoughts on this from different wrestlers. And I basically told them what it is. And I'm trying to be very careful because the company in question, they really are big supporters of ours. And I happen to like them a lot. But I really want to, certainly not say anything. But I have a good question. Let me move to a good question to you. What's your worst injury in your BYW career? That's a good question.
Ooh,
It's a very good one.
that's a good one because I've fortunately, um, I've never actually been like legitimately off the table injured in backyard wrestling. The only time I've ever been legitimately injured was when I was training.
I heard you talk about that. Now, talk about that for those that haven't caught that because it really sounded like something that should have really been kind of like a no brainer that should have never happened. And just talk about what happened because it actually wasn't on your end.
Yeah, and that's the worst part, and that's why, like, since I've come back, and I feel like people will notice this now that I say it. I feel like some people might have just noticed this in general, but I'm very protective of my bumps now because I've lost a lot of trust with other people, especially with
Sure.
like backyard people. It's hard to like sit here and like trust people with like pile drivers and like anything that involves my head, you know. But at a certain point in 2021, all my MEBW friends, like the people that I grew up with wrestling wise, they moved on to training. And I'd done training previously, but I didn't make it very far. I gave it up and I wanted to just do backyard wrestling because everybody else was doing it. And it was the social group part of it. And in 2021, all of them moved on. And it was time for me to do the same thing because that was just the next evolution, right? Everyone has to follow the same path. And I went, started my training again, and honestly, the first 7 to 8 weeks up until it happened, like I'm not gonna sit here and say I loved it because like the bumping and the feeding and all that shit was intensive on my body. It sucked.
Sure.
I had to still work 40 hours a week in addition to training, so I was up from uh, 7 a.m. every day to midnight every single day, like Monday through Thursday, and then the weekend is like my catch up time. And believe it or not, I was still yarding in my training. So like
Yeah,
on
I thought that
Saturdays,
was so fascinating that you said that because it's interesting because I think Anthony Steele actually was I think don't quote me this but I think Anthony Steele had like the same deal. He was doing indie and then he was doing yarding. And you're not supposed to do that. It's kind of like a big
dude, that's
no-no.
something we'll get into later with the indie yarding stuff.
Yep.
But I'll save that for later.
Yep.
I made it 8 weeks into the training. My trainers loved me. I'm like they can say what they want now because I'm yarding or whatever, and like all the veterans and stuff. And like the I learned from a friend that like a lot of the people that sit here and like shit on my yarding still watch my yarding. So like whether or not like whatever they want to say about me doing it, people are still watching, so I don't care. But I made it to week 8 and we were practicing suplexes. And suplexes realistically should be very easy. Like it is not hard. Like you've seen a suplex 10,000 times. And the guy delivering it was just he had a smooth brain, bro. Like he just did not get the concept of wrestling, but he was still there somehow. And he had hurt people previously in the class, but a thing in training and thing with like the indies and stuff like that, which I don't implore, is there's just this like need for people to like be inclusive and work with these people. And I decided to like grow the cojones to sit here and take the suplex from him. And when he picked me up, the suplex itself was fine because he's literally was built like John Cena. So I'm like, this
Oh,
should
okay.
be fine. But he picks me up, and before I know it, before my legs even go over my head, I'm falling. And
Nice.
the next thing I knew, it was just kind of like a flash of like blue light. I don't know what the fuck happened. I just hear my trainer running. He's like, "Get the fuck out of the ring!" And unbeknownst to me, I had a concussion, and I'd never had anything like that serious ever done to my body in my life. Despite the fact that I've like taken rakes to the head, I've like taken chairs to the head, I've like fallen on the ground in ways I shouldn't have, and this suplex was the one thing that took me out. And the thing about it was, it took literally 24 hours for it to like actually kick in. I don't know if it was shock. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't until I was at training the next day that I went to go. We were doing pin drills because he was just like, "We're not doing suplexes anymore because of this fucking guy." Um, we went to go do pin drills, and I wrestled 22 matches in a day or in a weekend. I was gassed off of doing pin drills, and then out of
Wow.
nowhere, I felt like I had to throw up. Um, I didn't know where I was anymore. I got super light sensitive, and I'll be 100% honest that the next month of my life is a complete blank. I don't remember anything about it, and
Wow.
I
I mean,
just
that's
it was
shocking.
bad.
That's, really, that's a kind of a life altering experience. I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, there are things that maybe you take for granted, but after something like that, you could have easily quit. You could have easily said, "You know what? I don't want to do this anymore. What could happen into my future? What if I want to do other things? I'm also working and I have to be able to provide for myself." And I
Mhm.
mean, you could have easily quit. And why didn't you quit? And why did you eventually come back and just stay with the yarding? So talk about that for those that are here and very curious.
Well, what ended up happening was I finally got through all that stuff, and once it's kind of hard to describe, but like once you're into wrestling or you're into the niche that you're in, you're never gonna leave. And all you do is you think about it. It's your escape from like regular life. You know what I mean? Because it's
Sure.
like I can sit here and go and watch a movie or something, but it's not the same as like going to a different state and wrestling a bunch of people that I happen to find on YouTube. And when I got hurt and then I made the recovery and I started getting my life in order, because it was like a not only just a wrestling thing, it was just a general life just fix up. It started making me like realize my priorities with a lot of stuff. And when I came down to it, I was just like, I realized like I never got hurt doing backyard wrestling. It was me trying to push myself doing something that like I could theoretically be capable of, but it wasn't what I wanted anymore. And a lot of people who like go through the training and then just quit the indies and then they don't do backyard wrestling anymore. They're just stuck in this like parabellum basically where it's just they want to wrestle, they don't want to deal with the indie scene, and it's just like they don't want to do the backyard stuff because they're afraid they're going to disappoint their trainers. But I didn't make it through. So like this would be a completely different conversation if I would have made it through and actually had some matches. But
But you know what? In a lot of ways, as we hear again with Star here of the Yards, that is the legendary Jack Delta, of course, is here for our friends over at the ROEW. I want to give them a huge shout out here. Please follow them on YouTube and Instagram at ROEW Backyard Wrestling. Also follow Jack on Instagram at Jack Delta 1999. You can also follow him on Facebook as well. But you know what? I mean, I think in a lot of ways, you know, going to backyard might have actually been better because what say you would have stayed, as crazy as it sounds, in the independents. And we kind of touched upon it a little while ago with the goofy match ending and the politicking and, the different things that go on where people have these ideas and then it's like it's not what you want to do. And then you work with these
mhm,
people that are unsafe and they don't know how to do things. And they say, like you also said at the beginning of the show, yeah, I'm a wrestler, I'm trained, but I'm not really trained. And, you know, it's not you. I mean, in a way, actually, as crazy as this sounds, Jack, going through that moment maybe was the light switch that you needed to do the things that you want to do. And you've arguably gotten more recognition being a backyard legend than you would have been as some guy on the indies that would have been this weekend warrior that would have been wrestling in your local town, and you would have probably had to go pay your dues, quote unquote, go through the ringer, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe one day you'd be lucky to get something out of it, but you might have actually hated wrestling, but here you are, and you're a international and worldwide superstar practically.
Yeah, exactly, and that's my point. I recognize that at some point, and like, yeah, I came up with this quote years ago, and I don't know where I came up with it from, but it was just like, I'd rather be the king of my little hill than just a footnote on a mountain. And
Absolutely, you'd rather be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond. I mean, that's the way the kind of simple terms there for people.
yeah, and the thing with the indies too is it's almost like it reminds me of like it's like the very early stages of AEW, and not that I'm going to get into the AEW WWE shit, because
Sure.
I hate when people devolve the podcast to that, because it's just like everyone has an opinion about it.
Trust me, I know there's a lot of competitors out there, and they want to ask you about your favorite SmackDown and bookings, and I'm not going to do that.
So yeah, but the
ahead.
antithesis of what it is like indie booking reminds me of very early AEW, where it was like the only people in AEW that were actually pushed were the people that were liked by the elite, who happen to be the bookers, and that's like indie wrestling, and it's like finest nutshell.
Well, there's a term that we use in the real politics, because I come from the real political world,
Mm-hmm.
and they call it fiefdoms. So what happens sometimes in these little places is that the promoters, because they have $10,000 lying around and they're able to go and make their own promotion, they kind of do things the way they want. And then they have their lieutenants, their 3 to 5 lieutenants in these little independent companies, and they have these fiefdoms. They push the people that they like. It may not necessarily be the best people or the best wrestlers in those little indie companies. And what happens is that there's a certain level of distrust and discontent, and sometimes for the creativity, in a way, kind of what you talked about in early AEW. Certainly WCW turned into that on a grandiose scale. Impact TNA turned into that. And I think that, for somebody like yourself who wants to go out there and be very independent, very free, that wouldn't have worked for you.
No, it wouldn't have, because I realized also at the basis of the backyard stuff and the independent wrestling stuff. Don't get me wrong, I like wrestling, and I like the stuff that's involved with wrestling, but like, I realized at the basis of it, I enjoy the entertainment aspect of it the most. I've learned the wrestling, I care about the wrestling, and I will not watch a bad wrestling show. But I care most about the fact that like backyard wrestling stuff is a YouTube product, and it's meant to be like most of the time, and this is the better ones. It should be all the time, is that you can tune into a completely random episode and walk away from it and not have to tune into the next one, not have to tune into the previous one to understand stuff. It is just a singular episode that you can tune into. And that's why I feel like it works with me, because I pop into places, I do my run, and then I leave. And it's just like, it's a footnote. And I I realize like sometimes I'll be like either wrestling at the place or just like before I even get there, it's just like, most of the time, this might be the only time I'll ever be here.
But you know what? That's how it was back in the day, when wrestlers maybe showed up for a little period of time in the AWA or in Mid-South, or the then WWWF or the NWA and all those different places. But I have a ton of comments here, and people want to get to you, and I realize that people have been patient. Worst injuries I ever had in my career is I hurt my back taking a suplex in 2006, and in 2007, I ended up needing 5 stitches in my head from a ladder to the head in a TLC match. The Nemesis James Taylor, yeah, I'm the same way. I'm particular about certain moves in my matches being done to me. Your opponent is supposed to be your dance partner and a person you're supposed to trust your life with. Amen to that. I do everything in my power to protect whoever I work with. I consider myself a safe guy in the ring. Delta, I believe, would be the same. Respect. And Atomic Titan says, James, I am giving you a destroyer off the roof, bro. And I think Mr. Taylor says, you better not. Yeah, we definitely don't want you getting a destroyer off the roof, because we want to have you back. We want to watch your shows. But I want to get to Apache King, because obviously he has been really your biggest champion? I know you have a lot of fans. I see you sign autographs. You have merchandise you sign. You're not one of these guys that says, "Hey, I've got a pro wrestling tees page. Buy my stuff." And the only people that might buy it is a
Dude,
few
I
friends.
forget I have T-shirts.
But that's my point. Is that you have got like a real fan base. People come on all the time, and I don't want to. That there are people that the only people that buy their stuff might be family. You, on the other hand, have this devoted fan base, and Apache King has been like your champion. So I got to give you the opportunity to speak about what he's meant to your career.
Apache King is probably one of the best things that's happened to my career, and it's because he's not. And I'm certain you've come across this. There are a ton of like very sus commenters that you'll come across with a lot of these wrestling videos. Like they're there for a specific reason that isn't the wrestling. But Apache King is not one of them. Apache King, every company that I've given him the like okay to watch my stuff, he gets super deep into the conversation about like the character stuff I'm trying to portray. He'll like bring up like points and reference points of like stuff that I did years ago. And he's the one who turned me on to WCEF. He's just such a genuine, like it kind of sucks because he had the few companies that he did talk about, and he was like in every single comment section like commenting stuff, but it's very rare for him to like appear nowadays. So he's just kind of like this like grand elder who just like decides to show up when he shows up. But when he does show up, it is the best comment on the video, like bar none. Because a lot of this is a big critique I have of backyard wrestling and indie wrestling too, is just live chats and the comment sections of places and stuff. I had commented this the other day under like my actual name, but like a lot of stuff isn't really like people real, and this is one of the biggest problems in backyard wrestling. A lot of stuff is people not really caring about what's happening on the screen. They only care about someone mentioning them, or like someone in the live chat trying to put themselves over under their like wrestling account. No offense to anybody like if you do that, but it's just like people sit here and they'll be under their company account, they'll be under their wrestling account, and they'll say, "Oh man, you better wait until I get
They
there
do that
one
in
day."
politics. Somebody will go under like an anonymous account or a fake name. They'll make a fake account, whether it's Twitter, or YouTube, and they'll all of a sudden start anonymously commentating. They call those keyboard warriors.
Yes, dude, and it is one of the worst things ever because it's just like nothing is worse. Because I told you of like when I go on my phone and I like look up this stuff, and when I go and I try to get the feedback, because like hundreds of people watch my stuff, but only like 5 or 6 comment. And when I go and I look at these comments, and one of the comments is just someone trying to put themselves over, it just makes me mad because it undermines everything that I do.
They're not watching the match organically. They're not watching it for what it's worth. They're watching it because you're Jack Delta and they're trying to get your attention. And that understandably bothers you because, you put time into this match and you would want people to kind of talk about it just like anything else. Look, if somebody goes to a show, right, whether they watch Metallica, whether they watch AC/DC or anybody else, right? I'm there to watch the band perform. If you want to talk to me about, let's say I played a song a certain way, or I didn't put this in my set list, or whatever it was, you'd be fine to address that. But if somebody's talking about, hey, can I wrestle you? It bothers you a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't mind people like reaching out to ask to wrestle because it's like everyone's going to eventually do that.
I understand.
Everyone wants to work with people, but it's just like the infinite amount of comments I get about like people just like putting themselves over, because like I'm not afraid to say it. I'm guarantee you'll probably have to work with them at some point. But there's this Aaron Blaze guy.
Okay.
And him and I had beef. I very rarely have beef with people, but he's in this like company where like it's him and this other guy, and all they do is they like wrestle each other under masks and stuff. And he like protrudes this gigantic like legacy of stuff that he's accumulated because he's beaten these masked characters so many times. But if you go and check any video of anything he's vaguely interested in working with, you'll go in the comments and you'll see either Aaron Blaze, you'll see ATK, or you'll see the YBW account under it talking about themselves and not talking about the actual match, the quality
Sure.
of what's happening, any of the story that's being presented. It's just them. And it's just so infuriating when it's just like, every once in a while, it'd be fine if you're like confirmed to go to the company or you've filmed something with them, but like sitting here just putting yourself over, it's
No,
bothering me.
absolutely. No question about that here. And we want to get to some more people. They want to say hello. Well, we have a little more time here with certainly Mr. Delta. Gosh, there's so many keyboard warriors in the promo world, nothing but jerks. I agree. There was an old expression in life I was told. Wasn't too many good ones I figured out, but if you don't have anything good to say, don't say it at all. I won't take moves unless I completely trust who I'm working with. Absolutely agree. Just kidding on the destroyer. Any move that I take looks like it hurts me is usually my idea. Great stuff there. And again, if you are on Instagram or YouTube, I can't stress enough how I want you to follow our friends over at the ROEW Backyard Wrestling. And we have more ROEW coverage coming up next Sunday, Mr. Delta, because the champion, that's right, he's coming to Sportswire Radio. Jason Storm has requested an opportunity to address yourself and the good guy CJ Black. He wants to talk about what you guys have done to him. He wants to talk about the future of ROEW and his championship and plus whatever else is on his mind. So we will certainly speak with Mr. Storm. That'll be Sunday, I believe, 7 p.m. Eastern time next week. So definitely want everybody to tune in to hear what Mr. Storm has to say. So definitely please do that. He's at jason.storm.byw. Please give him a follow on Instagram. That is jason.storm.byw. And in the meantime, we are here with Mr. Jack Delta for about 25 or 30 more minutes. We appreciate Mr. Delta's time. He's a very busy man. Craven Rage says, well, Jack Delta, Wrestling Championship Entertainment is about entertaining. We are just trying to bring backyard wrestling to Wisconsin that has been dead for many years. But honestly, here we love all the passion, dedication, and enjoy being in the ring. So I have to ask you then, I mean, we know a lot about you in ROEW. We know a lot
Mhm.
about that because we've watched you there. We've seen you in the ring there. But what is the future like for Jack Delta? I mean, will we see you in other places? Would you like to wrestle in different places out there? So, what's the future of Jack Delta here for the second half of 2023?
Well, the second half is not to spoil too much, but second half
Well,
is
don't
almost.
tell us anything that we're not supposed to know because it'll come back to me. I guarantee you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's how it usually works too. It's
Well, it works
second
that way. Trust me.
second half's pretty booked out, man. I ain't gonna lie. In terms of it's not even necessarily that I couldn't take more dates. It's just I can't take the time off work for said dates
Sure.
because people like get this kind of like idea of just like you aren't necessarily losing money, but the time that you don't work is the money that you're losing. Um, but I believe I'm booked out to August as of right now, in terms of like how many wrestling dates I can work per month and the amount of time that I'm like allowing myself to take off. Um, but at a certain point here, I won't spoil when. And I'm not necessarily ever going to actually do one. I'm not going to do a retirement run because like Ric Flair is like 85 years old
I
and he's
was
still
gonna say, I
wrestling.
even heard, yesterday. I can't believe I'm addressing this, but we had on a wrestler comment who was my guest Monday, who's actually a bit of a big deal in the UK. He's the Big Cheese Logan. He's the CWE UK champion. He just actually climbed a mountain. This guy loves us so much. He climbs a mountain and he comes right back and does our interview. And then he talks about the fact that apparently Hulk Hogan did Ariel Hawani's show, and he wants a retirement match against Stone Cold Steve Austin. So at this point, I would,
Dear
if I were you
God.
guys, to never do a retirement match because even if guys like, Flair has said he still doesn't think he's done. And then Hogan now wants one more match. So you can never say never in wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. So my thing with booking in the future is at a certain point here, I realize the entertainment aspect of backyard wrestling is what I want to pursue. And so at a certain point, I'm going to take less wrestling bookings, even though like everyone in the world wants to work with me, and start doing acting and YouTube and like this other side of like getting famous. Because I understand what makes people famous nowadays. Like it's all about how you market yourself, this, that, and the other
Absolutely.
thing, and making connections. And so I would rather put all my time and investment and energy into that at a certain point and not necessarily give up wrestling, but not do it as much. You know what I mean?
Well, listen, the body eventually, I mean, it does catch up. I mean, nobody has ever beat Father Time. And you're seeing it now. Listen, John Cena's on the big screen. He's in Fast X. And obviously, we've seen The Rock. The Rock has transitioned. Batista's in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. He has transitioned. So a lot of wrestlers have transitioned. Kevin Nash has had sort of a career as an actor. So, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, if that's what you want to do, I think you should do it. And also, I do have a good question for Mr. Taylor. And this is a good one, so I'm going to actually let him ask it. How long do you plan on being in BYW? Is there any certain matches you would want to do or dream matches?
Ooh, planning on being in BYW. I go until there's just a certain time when my body tells me I'm done, and I take a bump the wrong way, or I go to a specific place and I just don't have the greatest of time, and I just realize that like it's over, and I need to focus on acting or finding a different passion because that's all life is about, is finding like that escape outside of work, to actually go home and do. And in terms of dream matches or like potential matches,
Yep.
there are dozens of people that I can say that I want to wrestle. Um, I did my stuff in ESW, but 90% of that roster I'd actually like to wrestle a singles match against. Um, the TBW area, I know I want to face Ledger. James Taylor, you're on there as well. Jay Wild is a phenomenal competitor. I would love to
Yeah,
face him.
well, the name we're very familiar with, sure.
Um, let's see. Who else? There's Matt DeMorist. He went indie. I doubt I'll ever get that match, but he was probably my favorite backyard wrestler of all time. Just because he was doing moves that you see in AEW nowadays, like 15, 20 years ago on a
Well,
trampoline.
don't forget. I mean, listen, the Young Bucks started out as yarders. The Hardys started out as wrestling on a trampoline. So it's really not that far fetched that some of these guys got their starts in a yard. People think, oh my God, you see this sometimes on Sportswire. You mentioned the name like backyard wrestling. It's a dirty word, but I don't think it is. I was speaking with an unnamed. Actually, I was speaking with an unnamed indie wrestler 2 days ago, and he actually said he enjoys backyard wrestling more than independent wrestling. This guy, you wouldn't believe if I said the name. I don't want to basically blow his cover, but he said, listen, the independent wrestling scene, he doesn't like it. He likes backyarding, and he feels that what you said. So I think there's definitely a point to that here. CJ Judd says a part-timer smart.
Mm-hmm.
Delta in the next Marvel film. Well, listen, you never know. I mean, certainly that's a possibility. We'll see about that. Jack Delta in 23 Jump Street coming summer 24. Are they really making
23.
another 23 Jump Street? I guess
I
they
love
are.
these fan castings for these movies because you're just like exposing like what movies you watch. But no, dude. I was gonna say in terms of that this is like one of the last major things I really, really want to touch on.
Sure.
With like because one thing I do want to do, like in terms of like things that I have left to do in terms of accomplishing stuff, is I want to win a Money in the Bank style match at some point in my life. I want to win a Rumble, some type, like it's one of those.
His Rumble is actually a good one because when I had the Big Cheese Logan on, I actually asked him a question because he made his return to the ring, and he actually said what you said. He's much more of winning a Rumble than a world title, believe it or not.
Yeah, dude. And it's just the feeling of being one of those like random 20, 30 people that could potentially win it and actually winning it instead of I've made it to the final like 3 or 4 or like even the final 2 like multiple times now, but it's just like I'm never booked and not that like booking winning or whatever matters, but I wanted to compete in a steel cage match. I would love to do that one day.
That's a good one.
And then also at some point before I retire, I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to go into a whole tangent that I want to like talk over. But I want to compete in the shindies. I want to compete at those indie companies that book yarders and have the experience for myself. Because there's one thing that really irks me about like some of these like backyard into indie shindy companies, man, is just this like this idea that if you get a building and have a crowd, you're indie now. And it's like, you're not. Like, because like a lot of places, like they argue that they don't need a license or this, that, or the other thing. But it's just like so many of these promotions, like start off as a backyard company. They go through like all the things to become an indie company, but without actually getting trained. And then they go and hurt a bunch of people. then they make a bad reputation for themselves. And there are tons of places I can name like that. I'm not going to name names because
I can tell you, I actually know a few of them in England. So I mean, when you said all that stuff, I've heard through the grapevine from different channels. There are companies out there that they'll book untrained wrestlers to wrestle,
Mhm.
and they'll give them a gimmick. They'll set them up because they've sold 150 tickets, and they've got a
Mhm.
following. I don't want to. I don't want. I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
Some
dude,
people
and
can go.
that's one thing that it just irks me so bad. Not even necessarily the companies, but the people that do it, man. It's
Yep.
just like, listen, just because you stop competing in the yard and you're wrestling for some really, pardon my language, really shitty promotion somewhere, and you have all these like 20, 30-year vets, who haven't like really made it anywhere outside of that company, like, giving you advice, or you got gear now or something. It doesn't make you indie, man. Like, if you don't believe me and you think you're truly independent, come to Michigan, come get booked at one of the companies around me with your training, and tell me that you're actually independent. Go get booked somewhere outside of like somewhere you don't have connections at.
Sure.
That's how you truly know you're independent.
Absolutely. No, listen, no question about all that stuff here. But Craven Rage says, well, Jack Delta, if you're available for any booking until August, we definitely love you to come back to Wrestling Championship Entertainment anytime. If you'd like to step in the ring or even be a special guest, we would definitely accept it. You are definitely welcome. Don't worry. We will cover your stay. Okay,
Oh, that
well,
last sentence helps a lot with that. I might
okay.
contact.
Okay, well, that's certainly interesting points. I'm sure that promoters are certainly lining up left and right. But I mean, I wanted to ask you a fun question before we move on to closing thoughts. And I know you've had a lot of great matches. You've had a lot of great feuds. I thought the stuff you did with Executioner was great work. That whole kind of feud you had there in EBW for a while. But before CJ gets to a question, I have one. Who were some of your favorite opponents in your career?
Oh man, see, that kind of hurts because it's just like there's a lot of people that like I just have really good chemistry with, and like having a good match with someone is one thing, but having good chemistry where you both go backstage after a match and you're like, oh my god, dude, I didn't even need to tell you this, and you lined up for this move perfectly. Um, like I've experienced that like a good number of times. I'll say Sean Morgan from WCEF.
Yeah, it was a great match, by the way. That match that you had a few months back, phenomenal match.
Yeah, I love that match because it's like the technical in it is just phenomenal for what it is, and the storytelling of him going for like my head, and my neck because of
Yep.
the concussion, and him kicking out of specific moves, and Red X Dark also from WCEF, Ace WCEF, the whole host of boys from MEBW. So I'll just list off a bunch of Matt Thunder, Chris Storm, Tyler Adams, James Fury, Jacob Prodigy from ESW was phenomenal to work with. We had like 10,000 things planned for the match, and we only probably did like 12 of them. But the actual match that happened was pretty good. Executioner, Maximus Roman, EBW are phenomenal to work with. I think those two are like some of the most underrated, not talked about, even though they're on a popular channel. They need to be talked about more. Who else do I got? Jason Storm, even though I fucking hate that.
Well, Mr. Storm is coming on next week. That was kind of our big announcement. And I'll ask Mr. Storm his thoughts on you conversely. So, Mr. Storm, we're going to certainly get his opinions on you undoubtedly next Sunday.
Yeah. One day I would like mentor, mastered, like a protege type thing. I would like to step in the ring with Chris or alt account, CJ Black. Because I think he is very well versed in wrestling, and
Yeah, see, I gotta say, CJ. Speaking with CJ just bleeds wrestling. I mean, you could just tell, like, the way he was talking about it, and just his knowledge, and just talking about, here's a guy that basically didn't wrestle for 8 years, but kind of still followed it, watched it, and studies it. I mean, he's a guy that just eats, sleeps, drinks wrestling, and eventually one day, you and him having a match, there'd be a great story with that. I think a great match that would be able to kind of maybe show both of your strengths, and kind of also put that company, going back to what you said about helping certainly a company continue to grow. So I think CJ and you one day, maybe not today, but one day down that road would be a phenomenal match.
Yeah, I think so too. And that was the plan right before I was about to take off. We were going to have a program, and we even confirmed the match on screen.
Yep.
And he got a scathing promo cutting into my soul because I left, which was understandable. But I do look forward to wrestling him one day. There are a few people at the last company I went to that I'm not allowed to say just yet. It's gonna be very soon. I wish it would have been a few days from now so I could have actually talked about
Well,
it. But
you'll be back. Listen, you'll be back on Sportswire for sure. So won't be the only time you're on. So when you have, more stuff, obviously you're working with ROEW and we're working with them on Sportswire. They're part of the rotation now, like WC and IMF. So, we'll definitely give you those opportunities. I do have a couple of more comments before I get to a good question. Then we'll move on to one more question from me, then some closing thoughts. We want to really be appreciative of your time. Jack Delta versus James Marshall. James Marshall, the guy actually wrestled in UPW here in Michigan. He's their interstate champion. That would be a match to see. Want to give a big shout out to somebody from, again, California, Anastasia, I believe it's Risnia. She's from San Diego. Hey, Jack, it's been cool getting to know the part of you here. Welcome to Sportswire. You have a fan in San Diego. Big wrestling fan, huge part of San Diego. She's doing great things and big supporter of ours. And she says hi to you, so we appreciate that. I think Mr. Black says, I would never hurt you. He's still going about plan B. So understandably, he's still somewhat disappointed here. And I said, Nicholas Krentz is correct. I think I said James was the interstate champion. So that's a fair point here. But I have a good one here, which I want to actually allow CJ Junt to ask you. In states that you want to wrestle that you haven't wrestled in. I think that's a great question. Where would you like to go that you haven't yet?
that is a very good question. And honestly, I mean, I stated this a little bit ago. I do hope at some point in my life I could be the first person or one of the very few people in the world that can say that they've wrestled in every single state. Because as of right now, I'll spoil a little thing. I have 8 states. The last weekend was a completely new state, so I have 8 out of the 50, and that's such a long way to go. But 8 states is much more than most people can say that they've ever even traveled to in their entire lifetime. In terms of like specific states, completely depends on what the wrestling scene's like and if there's a company there that I want to work for.
That's a fair point. I mean, obviously, we've heard from different states tonight: Tennessee, Wisconsin, Iowa. We've heard from a lot of other states out there that I have no doubt would definitely want to see out there in the ring. And again, it's almost kind of like a Guinness Book of Records thing, where maybe that would be something out there. Reminds me, I think it was Def Leppard was in the Guinness Book of Records. I'm trying to think. They played like they played the most shows in like one day. They played something like 24 concerts or something, whatever it was. They did something. It was to promote an album. And it was in the 90s, actually. It wasn't when they were in their heyday. And they did it. They actually got into the Guinness Book of Records. And people asked them, well, how did you pull it off? It was like, well, we were trying to break this record. And, maybe that's what you're going to do one day. Get to all 50 states. And maybe that'll be in the Guinness Book of Records. But stay tuned. Obviously, Jack Delta, 1999 for that. But, I want to ask you 2 questions here. I'll save my last question for ROEW because I want to ask you an ROEW question, especially toward Mr. Storm. So I'll save him for last. But I wanted to ask you, and I always ask this question to people that come on to Sportswire, whether they're wrestlers, whether they're entertainers, whether they're athletes. I've had a lot of professional athletes, whether it's been politicians. But, I mean, if you had 1 or 2 moments in your career so far that stood out most, what would they be?
Oh man, that's deep. That's how I know you're a really good podcaster.
I told you I've been doing this a long time. I have a background in news. I have a career. I've had a career in politics. So I mean, I'm not one of these run of the mill Johnny come lately fanboy podcasters. I put my time in, just like how you put the time in your craft.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Because this is the first question that you've said that like I actually have to like genuinely like because like most of these like you'll say the question and I'm like primed up.
Well, but it's funny you said that because most guys that I have on Sportswire are the same way. But I'm actually going to say something because I came prepared for this. I'm going to say something that might actually answer it for you. Your 1 or 2 moments haven't happened yet.
My 1 or 2 moments hasn't happened. What do you mean by that?
What it means is that you have done a lot in your career so far, but there's an old analogy: the best is yet to come.
God, that dude, how did you out meta your question? That's insane.
Well, I actually, for those I've mentioned this before on my Sportswire shows, I actually was a tryout person for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So I actually, this is something
Wow.
that I've been
Dude,
doing
the
this.
more you talk is like you have this like secret resume of stuff that you just like
Well, that's been my career, so I'm going to answer it for you. The best is yet to come for you. Even though you've had all these moments, you've done all these different things, you're only just getting started. So I knew that was going to be your answer to my question. So that's, I think, where we're going to see the best is yet to come for you.
that was the most like Yu-Gi-Oh! Heart of the Cards moments I think I've ever experienced
I
in my
was a
entire
Yu-Gi-Oh player actually back in the day. I actually did play Yu-Gi-Oh. Actually, well, I am not afraid to. I know Nicholas Crenson and Sean Jovi. Some of the guys are Pokemon players, but I did play Yu-Gi-Oh. So yes, that wasn't Yu-Gi-Oh came to mind, but the best is yet to come for sure. And Mr. Black says, speaking of Matt DeMorris, thanks for the lights out finish, brother.
They
So he
do
did do a
share
good job.
the same finisher, which is incredible. One of the moments is definitely ESW. I think it's like the most full circle thing of my career because it's just like ESW, KBW, and GTS. I feel like are like the three pillars of backyard wrestling in terms of popularity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and striving to be on any of them are incredible. It's like the biggest achievement you can. And out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have done backyard wrestling, I can say I am one of the 4 people that have ever appeared on ESW, but I'm the only one that says they can do something notable and actually like made an impact. Because
Well,
like
I
I
think.
guarantee most of the people watching this
Mhm.
didn't even know the other crossover people were on that. I'm not even going to state them because you already don't know who they are.
But I think it shows that the career that you've had, and again, and I'm not blowing smoke up your horn before I get to my last question when it comes to ROEW, but you've had a career that I would argue is far more notable. And I mean this to no disrespect to any independent wrestler that I've had on around the globe here on Sportswire, because you've been in places, you've been in homes that people will never get into, never have
Mm.
that many eyeballs drawn to them. You're a name that automatically makes people speak. Tonight, I've had wrestler after wrestler come on and talk to you. Now, I get that regularly, but I don't get it from like a whole different load of regions. Usually I'll get like if it's in England, I'll get that company, their roster, and their, small band of fans. I got people from different places. So that shows the kind of individual that you are, the kind of abilities that you've had, and the type of people that you've reached, and the type of base that you have. It's all about your base. It's all about the different things that you have. But I want to ask you one more question in the interest of time, and obviously we'll definitely have you back on. I know obviously ROEW we have more coverage with, and that kind of is my final question. I wanted to make sure I save this obviously for the company. And what do you then want to say is your final shots for now, your final parting words, the destructive Jack Delta, for our current champion who's coming on here next week, Mr. Jason Storm? What do you want to say to Mr. Storm, A, before the next show, and B, before he comes on here next Sunday? Fire away.
All right, so I have one thing that I'm going to say before I address Jason Storm because I feel like this is important for the people that are watching this because I'll give you my secret on how I market myself and make myself known and go to all these places and figure this stuff out. Because you got different ways you can do this, but here's the secret. All right, you got to think about it like this: social media is one of the most insane tools you could possibly use to ever market yourself ever.
I agree.
Because you think about it like this, all right? Graduate high school, you've hung out with these people 5 days a week, all for 4 years straight. You don't keep in contact with them on social media. You don't think about them anymore. They're gone. They are just a ghost in your memory. However, all of these random avatars, all of these random people that you've never met before, that you just so happen to follow on social media and you have like random conversations with, you think about every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So they take up a small little portion of your brain, and every single day, as soon as you see them on your social media feed, whether it be the simplest of things, they pop in your brain. Your caveman brain says, "I like them." You like the photo, and it just keeps going. And before you know it, you talk to them all the time. They're your best friends, and you support everything they do. I did that with tons of people, and tons of people like me for that. But Jason Storm, I will tell you right now, you can hop on here next Sunday. I don't care when you hop on here. All right. I'll tell you right now, this is how your interview with Jason Storm is going to go. He's going to hop on here. He's going to be red in the face already. He's going to be wet for some reason. He's going to be angry. He's going to be screaming about something. He's going to be incoherent, like he's a goddamn caveman. All right, Jason Storm, you beat a man named C Money for the World Championship, not CJ Black. All right, you didn't beat Jack Delta, and the only match that you've had with me, the two matches you've had with me, there's not been a definitive finish.
No,
so
no.
Time I step in the
and
ring.
The last one, you beat the tar out of him, so I'll give you that much.
Yeah, because the chair needs me. I'll tell you right now, Jason, when I step in the ring with you again, this time it's going to be to beat you, to prove to the point that I don't need the chair. I don't need weapons. This time it's a mind game, and I'm going to pin you or submit you 1, 2, 3 and prove that I'm the better man. And then I'm going to come for the world championship.
Ooh, strong words. And, we'd asked, obviously, CJ on Sunday if he thought the attack had went too far, and CJ said it was really Jason Storm's fault. And then obviously Storm, I guess maybe against his best wishes or the best advice given to him, shows up here yesterday on ROW TV and keeps his championship. You're about to be the champion. And then obviously we see what goes on there. But we'll have to ask Mr. Storm those questions. Again, jason.storm.byw will certainly let Mr. Storm answer all those things here. But I have a couple more comments and we'll let to closing thoughts here. Nicholas Cranston says Sean Jovi and myself would have a good conversation on Yu-Gi-Oh! We probably would. Tom, I am not CIA, and Mr. Delta should not run, but he will be running soon because we are going to get to closing thoughts. And thank you, CJ. I'll definitely have you on here on the 14th. Very excited to have you, my good friend. So thank you for that. But I want to now give you the floor. I want to give you some closing thoughts. And obviously, it's been a tremendous honor to have had the opportunity to speak with you and only kind of scratch the surface of your story, your career, and who has made you into the destructive Jack Delta. But for those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio, wherever they may be, I give you the floor. Any closing thoughts, anything else you want to plug, share, say, and anything else out there in your mind, the floor is yours. Fire away.
God, you are so good at this. I want to say, number one, you are definitely one of the best podcasters, like interviewers I've ever seen in my life, because a lot of the interviewers that I've seen, they hop on there and then they make the show about themselves. Like I get there's like a certain point to like relating to certain things, but a lot of the times it's like a 60-40 share. You know what I mean? In favor of the podcaster and not the person getting interviewed. Because people, no offense to you, but people are tuning into the featuring person. You know what I mean?
Hearing you, I 100% agree with you. I always tell people all the time, and I appreciate the people that support, but they're not here for me. They're here for the destructive Jack Delta. They want to hear your story. My story doesn't pale into what your comparison. I want to tell your story because I want to hear your story also because I like to know about it.
Yeah, and see, that's what I love, man. Is I number one, I love the community. I love having interactions like this and meeting new people and learning new stories, wondering why things work the way they work, and the antithesis of like wrestling. It's just like wrestling is endless. Every single person that's involved in wrestling has had some type of encounter with another person in wrestling.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But I'd say final thoughts. In terms of like giving any type of advice, I'd say learn to take criticism, learn to understand what makes products work, why thumbnails work, why your wrestling doesn't work. Stop trying to put yourselves over. Learn what makes things work for me and why people like me and why it isn't working for you. And it's not to sit here and shit on people, but it's to give people criticism to understand that there is something wrong. There is a need for a change. And once you understand that and you go to places that can help you with that, you will love backyard wrestling. And another thing too, and this goes for CJ Black, whoever else happens to be in the chat, whoever watches this, if you're doing backyard wrestling, for the love of God, please travel one time and have that experience for yourself. Because I guarantee the second you do it, and people see you pop up at a certain place, and it's that little caveman part of your brain that says, "Oh man, I just went to this place. Go to this other place." It'll keep going. You'll keep having experiences. You'll keep making new friends, and you'll keep making memories. So those are my closing thoughts.
I could not have said it better myself. You can follow Jack Delta on Instagram, Jack Delta 1999. One more time, follow our dear friends over at ROEW on YouTube, ROEW Backyard Wrestling, where you can watch Jack Delta in action. You can see him there at Weekend Warfare. You can see some of his promos. Yesterday's basically segment with Mr. Storm deciding that he's going to still remain champion. For how much longer, we'll have to find out. And those platforms, you can certainly support all the great things. You'll see Jack Delta, and I'm sure many other places ahead here. My friend, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity. I can't thank you enough for sharing our story tonight with us here on Sportswire Radio. I hope that we get a chance to speak with you again in the near and distant future, and keep up the great work. Congratulations, and definitely looking forward to watching you here on the next ROEW show and much, much more. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Jack Delta himself, the Destructive. Jack Delta, man, has wrestled in 18 companies, 7 states, although he says 8 states is upcoming, but stay tuned for more details. He's been a champion all over the place, too many championships to have listed and counted, and I want to thank everybody here for tuning in. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are on Sportswire Radio. If you're on sportnarium.com/player, you'll go back to your regularly scheduled programming. If you're on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, I'm back here 8 p.m. British Standard Time with Ben Hampton, head of talent relations from Breakout Pro Wrestling. I'll also be here with the Sportswire Radio team later on in the evening, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, everybody here, for tuning in on the #1 global radio station that is Sportswire Radio. And thank you to the many fans of Jack Delta and our friends over at the ROEW.